Part 1. Arrival. The Afghan sun hit Forward Operating Base Vanguard like a physical blow, turning the air into something you could taste. Dust, diesel, and the metallic tang of spent ammunition from the morning's training exercises. Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Torres stepped off the transport helicopter into the rotor wash, her civilian clothes immediately gathering a fine coat of desert grit. She wore a simple button-down shirt, khaki pants, and hiking boots that had seen better days. Her duffel bag, the only luggage that had made it through the chaos at Bagram, contained exactly 3 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, and a ruggedized laptop that was worth more than most people's cars. What it did not contain was a uniform, dress insignia, or any of the official documentation that would identify her as anything other than what she appeared to be, a tired civilian contractor arriving at yet another dusty outpost in the middle of nowhere. This wasn't how she'd planned to arrive. Her original transport had been diverted after taking fire during approach to a different fob. Her gear, including her uniforms and credentials, had been rerouted through Kandahar and wouldn't arrive for another 48 hours. The only thing she had that identified her real position was the secure satellite phone in her pocket, encrypted with codes that would authorize her to do everything from calling in airstrikes to relieving commanders of duty. The phone also contained confirmation of something that wouldn't be publicly announced for another 6 days. Her promotion from Major to Rear Admiral, lower half. A jump of 3 pay grades that reflected 15 years of exceptional service in tactical intelligence, counterinsurgency operations, and a classified operation in Syria that had prevented what the Joint Chiefs called a humanitarian catastrophe of biblical proportions. She was here for her final field assessment before assuming command of Regional Task Force 7, overseeing operations across 3 countries and 12 forward operating bases. She was also here because FOB Vanguard had a problem. Intelligence leaks. Operational security failures. 3 missions compromised in the past 2 months, including one that had cost 2 American lives and left 4 others critically wounded. Someone at this base was either incompetent or compromised. And Rebecca Torres was here to find out which. "You must be the new admin support." The voice came from behind her, deep, authoritative, and carrying the particular kind of confidence that came from decades of command. Colonel Marcus Brennan approached with the stride of a man who'd spent his entire adult life in uniform. He was in his late 50s, with iron gray hair cropped close to his skull, a weathered face that spoke of too many deployments, and eyes that were sharp but tinged with the weariness that came from carrying too much responsibility for too long. He barely glanced at her. "Welcome to FOB Vanguard. Someone will show you to the admin tent. We're short-staffed, so you'll need to hit the ground running." He gestured vaguely toward a cluster of prefab structures and canvas tents. "Admin is that way. Lieutenant Griggs will get you set up." Rebecca opened her mouth to correct him, then stopped. Her orders had been explicit. Maintain a low profile until the official handover. The unannounced arrival was partly to assess the base's security protocols and command effectiveness without the distortion that came from everyone being on their best behavior. Perhaps this misunderstanding could provide valuable insight. "Thank you, Colonel," she replied, offering a nod that could be interpreted as either military courtesy or civilian deference. Brennan barely acknowledged it. He was already moving on, his attention focused on a stack of reports a sergeant was holding. "We've got a situation developing," he said over his shoulder, clearly not talking to Rebecca anymore. "5th Special Forces Group has a team embedded near the Pakistan border. Communications have been degraded for the past 6 hours. I've got a briefing in 20 minutes. He didn't wait for a response, just gestured again toward the admin area and walked away, already barking orders into a handheld radio. Rebecca stood in the swirling dust for a moment, watching the base operations with a trained eye. The guard rotation at the perimeter seemed irregular. She counted 17 seconds of overlap on one post and a 40-second gap on another. Unacceptable. The communications array was positioned in a depression that would make it vulnerable to indirect fire. Poor tactical thinking. The vehicle deployment pattern suggested they were using doctrine from 2010, which meant they were at least 3 tactical evolution cycles behind current best practices. And the way personnel moved between structures, too casual, too predictable, suggested that operational security had become routine instead of rigorous. She made mental notes of everything. Then she shouldered her duffel and walked toward the admin tent, just another anonymous civilian in a war zone full of them. Part 2. The admin tent. The admin tent was exactly what Rebecca expected. Organized chaos, held together by duct tape, energy drinks, and the grim determination of overworked staff. A harried-looking lieutenant, barely old enough to buy beer back home, glanced up from a computer screen that was displaying at least 15 open windows. "New support staff?" he asked, not really waiting for an answer. "Great. Perfect. There's a desk in the corner. Colonel Brennan wants the latest intelligence summaries compiled and formatted for the 1400 briefing. Simplified language. He doesn't want to wade through analyst jargon." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Simplified? Yeah, you know, bullet points, plain English, executive summary at the top. He's got a lot on his plate." The lieutenant, his name tag read Griggs, gestured at a stack of folders that looked like it had been breeding overnight. "That's everything that came in during the last watch cycle. You've got about 90 minutes. Coffee's over there, but it tastes like diesel fuel mixed with regret. Good luck." He immediately returned his attention to his screen, already forgetting she existed. Rebecca set her duffel down, sat at the dusty desk in the corner, and began reviewing the reports. Within 5 minutes, her pulse had quickened. Within 10, her jaw had tightened. By 15 minutes, she was making notes on her laptop with the kind of focus that came from recognizing patterns that other people had missed. The communications issues with the fifth group team weren't technical failures. The degradation pattern was too consistent, too targeted. Someone was jamming them, deliberately isolating them. The intelligence summaries contained scattered reports of unusual movement patterns among known insurgent cells, but no one had connected the dots. The reports were being read individually, cataloged, and filed, but no one was doing pattern analysis. No one was looking at the system. Rebecca could see it clearly. The Special Forces team wasn't just experiencing communication difficulties. They were being systematically cut off from support. They were being surrounded. And if no one acted in the next few hours, they were going to be overrun. She pulled up satellite imagery on her laptop. Her credentials gave her access to real-time intelligence feeds that would make Lieutenant Griggs's head explode, and overlaid the movement reports. There, clear as daylight to anyone who knew what they were looking for. 3 insurgent groups converging on the team's last known position. Anti-aircraft emplacements being moved into overwatch positions. Supply routes being cut off. This wasn't opportunistic. This was planned. The base loudspeaker crackled to life. "All command staff and operations officers report to the Command Operations Center for emergency briefing in 10 minutes. I say again, all command staff to the COC in 10 minutes.
Rebecca stood, slipping the most critical intelligence reports and her laptop into her bag. Protocol dictated she maintain her cover. Her orders were explicit.
But those men and women in the field were in imminent danger. And protocol could go to hell if it meant American soldiers died because she'd been too worried about following the script. She walked out of the admin tent and headed directly toward the Command Operations Center. Part 3. The Briefing. The Command Operations Center was a hardened structure, reinforced concrete, climate-controlled, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that made everyone look vaguely ill. A large digital map dominated one wall, showing the region in real time with various unit positions marked in blue and known enemy positions in red. Colonel Brennan stood at the head of a long table, surrounded by his staff officers. The air was thick with tension, stale coffee, and the particular brand of exhaustion that came from too many crisis briefings in too few days. "And we're implementing standard communication troubleshooting protocols," Brennan was saying, gesturing at the map. "Tech teams are working to identify the source of the interference. We should have the 5th Group team back online within 6 hours. With all due respect, Colonel," Rebecca interrupted, stepping fully into the room. "The 5th Group team doesn't have 6 hours. Every head turned. The room fell absolutely silent. Brennan's expression went from surprised to irritated in about half a second. "This is a classified briefing," he said coldly, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the civilian woman from earlier. "How did you get in here?" "I walked," Rebecca replied evenly, "and the 5th Group team is being deliberately isolated in preparation for a coordinated assault. The communication disruption isn't equipment failure. It's targeted jamming." A few of the junior officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. One captain looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Brennan's face flushed. "I don't recall asking the administrative staff for tactical analysis." A nervous chuckle rippled through the room. "This isn't a place for civilians playing soldier," Brennan continued, his voice hardening. "We have protocols. We have procedures. We have people with actual training and experience making these decisions." Rebecca stepped forward to the digital map and pointed to 3 specific locations. These movement patterns aren't random. They represent a coordinated effort to surround your team. Insurgent elements are positioning anti-aircraft assets here, here, and here. She tapped the screen, highlighting positions not currently marked on the map. If you implement standard extraction protocols, you'll fly directly into an ambush. You'll lose the rescue birds and everyone on them. Brennan's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the edge of the table. "That's enough," he said quietly, dangerously. "Lieutenant Griggs, please escort our enthusiastic new hire back to her desk. Perhaps filing reports is more appropriate than interrupting military operations." As Lieutenant Griggs started to move forward, looking deeply uncomfortable, the satellite phone in Rebecca's pocket rang. Not a normal ringtone. A specific tone that indicated a priority call that couldn't be ignored. The kind of call that came from people with stars on their shoulders. The room watched in confused silence as she answered. "Yes, General Morrison, I understand. The situation has escalated. Yes, I'll inform Colonel Brennan." She lowered the phone and met Brennan's eyes. "General Morrison requests immediate action on the 5th Group situation. JSOC intelligence confirms my assessment. The team is being surrounded by a coordinated insurgent force. Estimated time until assault? 90 minutes. Maybe less." Brennan's face was unreadable. He extended his hand. "Let me speak to the general." Rebecca handed him the phone. The conversation was brief, terse, and conducted in the particular kind of clipped military shorthand that conveyed a lot of information in very few words. When Brennan handed the phone back, his expression had changed, still hard, but now tinged with something that might have been grudging respect, or might have been anger at being overruled. "The general suggests," he said, his tone carefully neutral, "that we consider your analysis." He paused. "So enlighten us, Major Mitchell." Rebecca didn't correct the rank. Not yet. "What we need is a 2-pronged operation," she said, returning to the map. "Standard protocols won't work. They're watching for that. We need to create a diversion, heavy, loud, obvious to the north, while conducting the actual extraction from the south through this valley." She traced her route with her finger. Brennan scoffed. "A major playing dress-up as a civilian, and now you're suggesting we abandon 40 years of extraction doctrine based on a hunch." The room had gone very quiet. "Next, you'll tell me you learned these tactics playing video games," Brennan continued. His voice carried an edge of mockery that made several officers wince. "This isn't a place for amateurs or desk officers, Major. Lives are at stake. Real lives. Men and women who trust their commanders to make sound decisions based on experience, not intuition." Rebecca maintained her composure with effort. "The insurgents have positioned anti-aircraft weapons here, here, and here," she said, marking the locations on the map with calm precision. "They're expecting a standard helicopter extraction. If you send birds in from the north or east, you'll lose them. The only approach that has a chance is from the south, using this terrain masking." "And I suppose you have intelligence confirming these AA positions?" Brennan asked, his tone making it clear he expected the answer to be no. "Actually, yes." Rebecca pulled up satellite imagery on her laptop and connected it to the main display. These were taken 40 minutes ago. The room stared at the screen. The anti-aircraft positions were exactly where she'd said they'd be. The silence was profound. Brennan's face went through several interesting color changes. "How did you... That's real-time JSOC intelligence. You shouldn't have access." The satellite phone rang again. Rebecca answered, listened for exactly 12 seconds, then addressed the room. "General Morrison has authorized me to take operational command of this rescue mission." She pulled a folded document from her pocket. She'd been carrying it since she arrived, just in case, and handed it to Brennan. "My credentials, Colonel. Authorization codes. And before you ask, yes, I'm actually Rear Admiral Mitchell as of 4 days ago." The announcement was scheduled for next week, but circumstances have changed. The color drained from Brennan's face as he unfolded the document and scanned the codes. The room erupted in barely suppressed chaos, officers leaning over to see the document, others staring at Rebecca like she'd just materialized out of thin air. "We have American soldiers about to die if we don't act now," Rebecca said, her voice cutting through the noise. Your experience in this region is valuable, Colonel. Your knowledge of the terrain and the local situation is irreplaceable. Will you help me save them, or do I need to find someone who will? Brennan stared at her. Pride warred with duty in his eyes, reflected in the harsh fluorescent light. The clock on the wall ticked forward. Somewhere out in the desert, American soldiers were running out of time. Part 3, the briefing, continued. The silence in the command operations center stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Colonel Brennan stared at the authorization document in his hands, his eyes moving over the codes, the signatures, the official seals that couldn't be faked. His jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. Rebecca watched him, with the patience of someone who'd been in enough high-stakes situations to know that pushing now would be counterproductive. She'd made her play. Now she had to let him decide whether to fold or stay in the game. The digital clock on the wall showed 1347 hours. Somewhere in the mountains near the Pakistan border, a special forces team had maybe 90 minutes before the hammer fell. Finally, Brennan looked up. His face was carefully neutral, but Rebecca could see the war happening behind his eyes. Pride versus pragmatism, ego versus duty. Your tactical assessment, he said slowly, his voice stripped of mockery now. Walk me through it. Everything. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was an opening. Rebecca moved to the digital map, her fingers flying across the interface as she pulled up layers of intelligence. Satellite imagery, signals intercepts, movement pattern analysis, terrain mapping. 3 insurgent groups, she began, highlighting positions on the screen. Approximately 60 to 80 combatants total, which is significant for this region. They've been moving into position over the past 18 hours, but the pattern only becomes visible when you aggregate all the reporting. She zoomed in on a valley where the Special Forces team's last known position was marked. The team is here, embedded with local militia forces in this compound. They've been conducting a hearts and minds operation, training local fighters to defend against Taliban incursions. Standard stuff, but someone leaked their location. Brennan's expression darkened. How do you know it was a leak? Because the insurgent movement patterns began exactly 4 hours after the team filed their sitrep through standard channels. That report went through this base's communication systems before being relayed to higher headquarters. The implication hung in the air like smoke. You're saying we have a security compromise, Brennan said quietly. I'm saying it's a strong possibility, but that's a problem for tomorrow. Right now, we need to extract that team. She pulled up the anti-aircraft positions again. They've positioned AAA here, here, and here. Soviet-era ZSU-23-4s. Mobile, radar-guided, extremely effective against helicopters. If we come in from the north or east using standard approach vectors, we'll fly right into their engagement envelope. Captain Jennifer Reeves, the base's intelligence officer, leaned forward. What about coming in from the west? That valley looks clear. It's a kill box, Rebecca said, zooming in on the western approach. See these positions? She highlighted several points along a ridgeline. RPG teams. They're not showing thermal signatures because they're cold. No active positions, just fighters waiting in spider holes. They want us to see the AA to the north and east, assume the west is clear, and fly right into a close-range ambush.
How can you be sure? Brennan asked.
Because it's what I do. Rebecca met his eyes. It's a sophisticated trap, Colonel. Whoever planned this knows American tactics. They know how we think, how we operate. They're counting on us seeing the obvious threat and choosing what looks like the safer option. So what's your solution? Rebecca traced a route on the map with her finger. We create a massive diversion to the north. Heavy, loud, and obvious. Armor, artillery, everything that makes noise and draws attention. We make them think we're coming in hard from that direction. And while every insurgent in the area is watching that light show, she highlighted a narrow valley to the south. We send 2 stealth birds in low and fast through here. It's risky, the valley is narrow, and the terrain is unforgiving. But the insurgents won't be watching it because they'll be focused on the northern diversion. By the time they realize what's happening, our birds will be on the ground, loading up and gone. Brennan studied the map, his brow furrowed. That southern approach is a knife's edge. One wrong move and those birds will be flying straight into a mountainside. Yes, sir, which is why we need your 2 best pilots. Ones who know this terrain and can fly it with their eyes closed. Brennan nodded slowly. CW4 Martinez and CW3 Johnson. They've been flying this region for 18 months. If anyone can thread that needle, they can. Good. We'll also need a ground element to provide suppressive fire during the extraction. Someone who can move fast and hit hard. Major Tom Casey, commander of the base's Quick Reaction Force, spoke up. I've got a platoon of Rangers ready to go. We can be airborne in 15 minutes. Rebecca shook her head. Not airborne, ground insertion. Here. She marked a position about 3 clicks from the Special Forces team's compound. You insert quietly, move into overwatch positions, and provide suppressive fire when the helicopters come in. The insurgents will be focused on the extraction. They won't see you until you open up. That's a long hump in hostile territory, Casey said, but his tone was thoughtful, not argumentative. And we'd need to move fast. Can your Rangers handle it? Casey's grin was wolfish. Sir, my Rangers can handle anything. Then let's make it happen. Rebecca turned back to Brennan. Colonel, this is your base and your operation. I'm not here to take over. I'm here to help. You know your people. You know this terrain. I'm just providing the tactical framework. Will you execute it? It was a deliberate choice, offering him command, not seizing it, giving him a way to save face while still implementing her plan. Brennan's eyes searched hers for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, Admiral. We'll do it your way. He turned to his staff. Captain Reeves, coordinate with signals to start jamming their communications. I want them blind when we move. Major Casey, get your Rangers kitted up and ready to roll. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, I want every piece of armor we have moving to staging positions north of the objective within 30 minutes. Make it loud. Make it visible. The room exploded into controlled chaos as officers moved to their stations. Radios crackled to life, and the machinery of a military operation began to grind forward. Brennan caught Rebecca's arm as she moved toward the communication station. Admiral, he said quietly, so only she could hear. I was out of line earlier. The comment about video games. That was unprofessional. Forgotten, Colonel. Let's just bring our people home. One question, though. Where did you learn these tactics? Rebecca's smile was thin. Kandahar Province, 2019. I was running tactical intelligence for a joint task force. We lost 3 helicopters in 2 weeks because we kept doing things by the book. The 4th time, I suggested we try something different. It worked. What happened to the people who shot down those first 3 birds? We found them. All of them. Her voice carried an edge that could cut glass. They don't shoot down helicopters anymore. Brennan nodded slowly. Remind me never to get on your bad side, man. Part 4, Operation Shadowfall. The Operations Center transformed into a symphony of controlled chaos. Radio chatter filled the air. Calm, professional voices coordinating movements across multiple frequencies. Digital displays showed unit positions updating in real time as pieces moved into place on the vast chessboard of the Afghan countryside. Rebecca stood at the main tactical display, watching the operation unfold with the intensity of a surgeon monitoring a patient's vital signs during a complex procedure. Diversion force in position, reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes from the northern staging area. 3 strikers, 2 Bradleys, and a full artillery battery. We're ready to make some noise on your mark. Hold position, Rebecca replied. Extraction birds are still 15 minutes out. On another screen, she could see the 2 MH-60 Blackhawks, call signs Reaper 1 and Reaper 2, flying low and fast across the desert, staying below radar coverage and using terrain masking to avoid detection. Major Casey's Ranger platoon had already inserted via ground vehicles and was moving on foot toward their overwatch positions. Their progress was marked by small blue icons crawling across the map, each representing 4 highly trained soldiers carrying enough firepower to level a small town. Admiral, Captain Reeves said from the intelligence station, we're picking up increased radio chatter among the insurgent groups. They know something's happening, but they haven't spotted our extraction birds yet. What about the northern diversion? They've definitely seen it. Thermal imaging shows fighters moving toward those positions. It's working. They're taking the bait. Brennan stood beside Rebecca, his earlier antagonism replaced by focused professionalism. Once we kick this off, we'll have maybe 20 minutes before they realize it's a feint and reposition. Our birds need to be in and out before that window closes. Agreed, which is why we're not waiting any longer. Rebecca keyed the radio. Reaper Flight, this is Guardian Actual. You are cleared to proceed to target. How copy? Guardian Actual, Reaper 1. Good copy. Proceeding to target. ETA 12 minutes. Diversion Force, this is Guardian Actual. Execute Operation Shadowfall. I say again, execute Shadowfall. Guardian Actual, diversion. Executing now. Time to make some noise. The northern sector of the map erupted in a display of pyrotechnics that would have made a Hollywood director weep with envy. Artillery batteries opened up, sending high explosive rounds screaming into the mountains with thunderous booms that echoed across the valley. Tracer fire lit up the pre-dusk sky like deadly fireworks. The Strikers and Bradleys advanced in a line, their 50 caliber machine guns and 25mm cannons chattering in rhythmic bursts. It was a show of force designed to grab attention and hold it, a tactical middle finger to anyone watching. Insurgent forces responding, Reeves reported. They're moving toward the diversion. Our Rangers report good concealment. Enemy forces are passing within 100 meters and not spotting them. Reaper Flight, what's your status? Guardian Actual, Reaper 1. We've entered the southern valley. Terrain is tight, but we're managing. No sign of enemy activity in our sector. 6 minutes to target. Rebecca watched the helicopter icons crawl across the map, threading through a virtual canyon that left almost no margin for error. Brennan leaned in. Martinez is one of the best pilots I've ever seen. If anyone can make this work, it's her. Let's hope so, Colonel, because if this goes wrong, then we adapt and overcome, Brennan finished. We always do. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Reaper Flight, 3 minutes to target. Guardian Actual, Mongoose 6, came a new voice, the Special Forces team leader on the ground. We can hear your diversion. It sounds like World War III up north. The compound is heating up. Local militia forces are nervous, and we've got eyes on insurgent scouts moving in from the east. Mongoose 6, Guardian Actual. Hold tight. Extraction is 3 minutes out from your position, coming from the south. Pop smoke on my mark. Roger, Guardian. Standing by. Reaper Flight, 2 minutes. Rebecca's hands gripped the edge of the display table. This was the critical moment, the point where plans either worked or fell apart in a chaos of fire and violence. Reaper 1 has visual on the compound, the pilot reported, her voice calm despite flying at 120 knots through a valley barely wider than her rotor disc. Setting up for approach. Mongoose 6, pop smoke now. Smoke out. On the overhead surveillance feed, Rebecca watched as purple smoke billowed from the compound's courtyard. Reaper 1 has purple smoke. Beginning final approach. The two Blackhawks came in fast and low, their approach angle so steep it looked like they were falling out of the sky. They flared hard, their rotor wash kicking up a blinding cloud of dust as they settled into the compound. Reaper Flight is on the ground. 30 seconds. The Special Forces team moved with practiced efficiency. 12 operators plus their militia liaison, a mix of Americans and local allies, ran for the helicopters in a crouched sprint. Weapons up, heads on swivels. Professional. Taking fire, Reaper 2's pilot shouted. Small arms from the ridgeline. Mongoose 6, Ranger 3, Major Casey's voice cut in. We've got your backs, engaging now. The Ranger Overwatch positions opened up with a devastating symphony of precision fire. M240 machine guns hammered away at the ridgeline positions. Designated marksmen with SR-25 rifles picked off individual threats with surgical accuracy. A Carl Gustav recoilless rifle coughed, and an insurgent position erupted in a ball of flame. Load complete, shouted the crew chief on Reaper 1. We're packed. Reaper Flight, get airborne now. The helicopters lifted off, their turbines screaming as they clawed for altitude. Tracer rounds reached up toward them like deadly fingers, but the suppressive fire from the Rangers kept most of the insurgents' heads down. We're taking hits, Reaper 2's pilot reported. Nothing critical yet, but an explosion lit up the compound below, an RPG that had narrowly missed Reaper 1 and detonated against a wall. Reaper Flight, egress south. Ranger Element, break contact and move to extraction point Alpha. The helicopters banked hard, diving back into the southern valley, using the terrain to mask their escape. Behind them, the Rangers disengaged with the smooth precision of a unit that had done this 100 times, leapfrogging back toward their vehicles while maintaining suppressive fire. Reaper 1 is clear of the valley. No enemy pursuit. Reaper 2 is clear. We've got some battle damage, but nothing that'll keep us from getting home. A cheer went up in the operations center, quickly suppressed, because the mission wasn't over yet. But the tension that had been coiled tight in everyone's shoulders released slightly. Ranger element is mobile and moving to extraction point, Casey reported. No casualties. We are having a very good day. Rebecca allowed herself a small smile. Diversion force. Begin phased withdrawal. Do not, I say again, do not give them an easy target. Bound back by elements. Roger, Guardian. Beginning withdrawal now. She turned to Brennan, who was watching the displays with an expression that might have been pride, might have been relief, or might have been both. Your people performed flawlessly, Colonel. That was textbook execution. Your plan, Admiral. We just ran the play you called. A play is only as good as the people executing it. She keyed the radio one more time. All elements, Guardian actual. Well done. Reaper flight, proceed direct to base. Medical is standing by for assessment of your battle damage. Mongoose 6, welcome back to the land of the living. Guardian actual, Mongoose 6, came the Special Forces team leader's voice, and for the first time there was emotion in it. Thank you. That was about as close as I ever want to cut it. Tell your planning staff they're buying the first round when we get home. I'll pass that along. Guardian actual, out. Rebecca stepped back from the display, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The adrenaline that had kept her sharp and focused was beginning to ebb, leaving behind the particular kind of weariness that came after high-stakes operations. Brennan approached, offering a bottle of water. Admiral Mitchell, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you the lives of 12 Americans who'd be dead right now if you hadn't pushed back against my stubbornness. Rebecca took the water, drank deeply, then met his eyes. You're a good officer, Colonel. Your people respect you, and you care about them. That counts for more than you might think. But I let assumptions cloud my judgment. Assumptions based on appearances. He gestured at her civilian clothes. And prejudices I thought I'd left behind years ago. We all have them. The trick is recognizing them and not letting them get people killed. Is that why you're really here? Not just for the assessment, but to see how we handle unconventional leadership? Rebecca smiled slightly. That's above my pay grade to answer, Colonel. But I will say this. The military is changing. We're finally starting to recognize that the best person for a job might not look like what we expect, might not fit the traditional mold. And officers who can adapt to that reality, who can see past the surface to the substance, those are the ones who'll succeed in the next generation of warfare. Before Brennan could respond, the operations center door burst open. A young private rushed in, slightly out of breath. Sir, ma'am, the helicopters are landing. The Special Forces team is requesting to speak with whoever planned the operation. Tell them we'll meet them at the flight line, Rebecca said. Both Colonel Brennan and myself. Part 5. The Flight Line. The sun was setting over Fob Vanguard, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed almost obscene in their beauty, a stark contrast to the violence that had unfolded just 30 minutes prior. The two Blackhawks sat on the tarmac, their engines winding down, still ticking and pinging as they cooled. Crews swarmed over them, assessing the battle damage. Rebecca counted at least 15 bullet impacts on Reaper 2's fuselage, including 2 that had punched through non-critical systems. The Special Forces team was disembarking, dirty and exhausted, but alive. They moved with the loose-limbed walk of soldiers coming off an adrenaline high, checking weapons and gear with automatic precision, even as medics approached to assess them for injuries. The team leader, a captain with a weather-beaten face and eyes that had seen too much, spotted Rebecca and Brennan approaching and snapped to attention, rendering a sharp salute. Captain Eric Dalton, 5th Special Forces Group. Sir, ma'am, I understand you planned our extraction. Rebecca returned the salute. Rear Admiral Rebecca Torres, Captain, but the credit goes to Colonel Brennan's people. They executed the plan. Dalton's eyes widened slightly at the rank, then he turned to Brennan. Colonel, your people just pulled our asses out of a fire we didn't even know we were in. We'd been hearing distant gunfire for hours, but didn't realize it was a full encirclement until your diversion kicked off and we saw how many of them there were. The Admiral here spotted the pattern before we did, Brennan said, and there was no bitterness in his voice now, just professional respect. She's the one who pushed for immediate action. Then thank you, ma'am. Dalton extended his hand. Rebecca shook it. His grip was firm, his hand rough with calluses. My team, we've been in some tight spots before, but this one would have been our last if you hadn't come through. One of his sergeants, a bear of a man, with a full beard and gear that looked like it had been through a war, approached. Ma'am, the captain's being polite. What he means is that we were about 15 minutes from being overrun by about 60 very motivated insurgents with enough firepower to level that compound. We'd already identified the likely attack routes and were preparing to make our last stand when your birds showed up. You saved our lives. All of us. Rebecca felt the weight of those words. 12 lives. 12 families who wouldn't be getting the worst news imaginable. 12 soldiers who'd go home, who'd see their kids grow up, who'd have a future because she'd been willing to push back against a superior officer's assumptions. It was why she did this job. You would have done the same for us, Sergeant. That's what we do. Who out of that, ma'am? A commotion near the base headquarters drew everyone's attention. A UH-60 was landing. Not one of the extraction birds, but a newer, cleaner variant with command markings. As the rotor spun down, a figure emerged. A woman in her early 60s with stars on her collar and a bearing that spoke of decades of service at the highest levels. "Attention!" someone barked, and the entire flight line snapped to. Lieutenant General Janet Morrison, commander of Combined Joint Task Force 7 and one of the most respected officers in the theater, strode across the tarmac with the confidence of someone who'd spent her entire career proving she belonged in rooms where people thought she didn't. She stopped in front of Rebecca and rendered a salute that was sharp enough to cut. "Admiral Torres, I came to personally oversee the official change of command and to congratulate you on a successful operation." Rebecca returned the salute. "Thank you, General, but the success belongs to Colonel Brennan and his staff. I just provided analysis." Morrison's smile was knowing. "I've read your after-action reports from Syria and Kandahar, Admiral. Your analysis has a tendency to save lives that would otherwise be lost to conventional thinking." She turned to Brennan. "Colonel, a moment, please." The two senior officers stepped aside, speaking in low tones. Rebecca couldn't hear the conversation, but she could read body language, and what she saw was Morrison praising Brennan, while also, very gently, pointing out the areas where his judgment had been compromised. It was a masterclass in leadership, acknowledging the good while correcting the problematic, doing it in a way that preserved dignity while still making the lesson stick. When they returned, Morrison addressed the assembled personnel. Word had spread, and now there were at least 50 soldiers gathered on the flight line, watching the scene unfold. "People of FOB Vanguard," Morrison began, her voice carrying across the space, "you've just participated in a successful rescue operation that exemplifies the best of what we do. Courage under fire, adaptability in planning, and the willingness to listen to good ideas regardless of where they come from." She gestured to Rebecca. "Rear Admiral Torres has been promoted early, a testament to 15 years of exceptional service in tactical intelligence and operational planning. She was supposed to arrive here in proper uniform with full credentials, but circumstances forced her to improvise. And in that improvisation, we learned something valuable about our own blind spots." Morrison's gaze swept across the crowd. "How many of you saw a civilian woman in khakis and made assumptions? How many of you dismissed her before knowing her qualifications? Be honest with yourselves." There was an uncomfortable shuffling in the crowd. "We all do it," Morrison continued. "We all make snap judgments based on appearances, based on expectations, based on what we think leadership is supposed to look like. But the future of warfare isn't going to be won by officers who fit a mold. It's going to be won by people who can think differently, see patterns others miss, and have the courage to speak up even when they're in a room full of people who outrank them." She turned back to Rebecca. "Admiral Torres will be taking command of Regional Task Force 7 next week. But before that happens, I'm told there's an official change of command ceremony to conduct here at FOB Vanguard. Colonel Brennan?" Brennan stepped forward, holding a pair of shoulder boards with the insignia of a rear admiral, the single star that marked her new rank. Morrison removed the plain collar devices Rebecca had been wearing and replaced them with the starred boards, her movements precise and ceremonial. "By order of the Chief of Naval Operations, and with the authority vested in me as theater commander, I hereby advance you to the rank of Rear Admiral, lower half, United States Navy. Congratulations, Admiral Torres. Wear this rank with the same honor and distinction you've shown throughout your career." The assembled personnel erupted in applause, genuine, enthusiastic applause that echoed across the flight line. Rebecca stood at attention, feeling the weight of the new insignia on her shoulders, and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Not triumph, not vindication, just the quiet knowledge that she'd earned this, that she'd proven herself not by demanding respect, but by demonstrating competence when it mattered most. Part 6. After Action. The sun had fully set by the time the ceremony concluded and the crowd dispersed. Rebecca found herself back in the operations center with Brennan, Morrison, and a handful of senior staff, conducting the formal after-action review. The operation was a success, Morrison said, but we still have the larger problem, the security leak that compromised the Special Forces team's position in the first place. I've been thinking about that, Rebecca said, pulling up her laptop. With your permission, General, I'd like to conduct a full audit of the communication logs and personnel access records. Permission granted. Colonel Brennan, you'll provide Admiral Torres with full access to all systems and personnel. Of course, General. Over the next 2 hours, Rebecca dug through data with the focus of a forensic accountant hunting embezzlement. Communication logs, access records, personnel movements, cross-referenced with external intelligence reports. And there, a pattern, subtle but visible to someone who knew what to look for. Here, she said, highlighting a series of entries. Someone with access to classified reporting has been accessing files they shouldn't have any reason to view. Communication summaries, team locations, operational timelines. All of it accessed at odd hours and from terminals in the admin area. Who? Brennan asked, leading in to look. Rebecca pulled up a personnel file. Brennan's face went pale. That's Lieutenant Gree. You can't blame yourself for not spotting something that was deliberately hidden. But you spotted it. Because I had the luxury of coming in with fresh eyes and no preconceptions. You were too close to it. That's not a failure, Colonel. It's just human nature. Morrison checked her watch. It's late and we've all earned some rest. Admiral Torres, you'll bunk in the senior officers' quarters tonight. Tomorrow we'll begin the formal transition process. As the room cleared, Brennan caught Rebecca's arm. Admiral, I want to apologize again, not just for the assumptions I made, but for the way I dismissed your expertise. That was inexcusable. Rebecca studied him for a moment. Colonel, can I be candid with you? Please. You're a good officer. You care about your people. You have solid tactical instincts, and you've built a team that respects you. But you have a blind spot when it comes to unconventional perspectives. You default to traditional thinking even when the situation calls for innovation. Brennan nodded slowly. That's fair. The good news is that blind spots can be corrected. You proved that today. When it mattered, you put aside your ego and executed a plan you didn't initially agree with. That takes strength. A lot of officers can't do that. Thank you, I think. Rebecca smiled. Take it as a compliment. The military needs officers who can adapt, who can listen to people who don't fit the expected mold. Because the next war, the one we're probably already fighting without fully realizing it, is going to be won by people who can think differently. Like you. Like a lot of people, Colonel. I'm just one of them. Brennan extended his hand. It's been an honor, Admiral. Even if the circumstances were unconventional. Rebecca shook his hand. Likewise, Colonel. Keep doing good work. Your soldiers deserve it. Epilogue, 6 weeks later. Rear Admiral Rebecca Torres stood in her new office at the Regional Task Force 7 headquarters in Qatar, looking out over the sprawling base complex. 6 weeks had passed since FOB Vanguard. 6 weeks of transition, briefings, personnel reviews, and the million small tasks that came with assuming a major command. The intelligence leak investigation had revealed a larger network. Lieutenant Griggs had been one of 3 compromised personnel feeding information to a Taliban intelligence cell. All 3 were now facing courts-martial, and the counterintelligence sweep had closed the security gaps. Colonel Brennan had been reassigned, not as punishment, but as recognition. He was now commanding a training battalion, where his experience and newly developed awareness of his own biases made him ideal for shaping the next generation of officers. The Special Forces team captain, Dalton Led, had been back in the field within a week, operating with their usual lethal efficiency, and Rebecca Torres had taken command of 12 forward operating bases, 1,700 personnel, and operations spanning 3 countries. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Her aide, a sharp young Navy lieutenant named Sarah Park, entered with a tablet. Ma'am, you have a video call scheduled with the Joint Chiefs in 30 minutes, and this just arrived, marked personal. She handed Rebecca a handwritten note on official stationery. Rebecca opened it and smiled. Admiral Torres, wanted to drop you a line to say thank you for the lessons learned at Vanguard. I've been implementing some changes in how we evaluate non-traditional approaches to tactical problems. My staff thinks I've lost my mind, but the results speak for themselves. Also want to let you know, the Special Forces team you extracted has requested you as guest of honor at their unit's annual dining in. I think they want to buy you that drink Captain Dalton promised. Respectfully, Colonel Marcus Brennan. Rebecca set the note aside and turned back to the window, looking out over the base as dusk settled over the desert. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the battles fought not just against enemy forces, but against assumptions, prejudices, and institutional inertia. She thought about all the women who'd come before her, who'd fought these same battles with less support and fewer allies, the pioneers who'd broken down doors so that she could walk through them. And she thought about the women who'd come after, the ones who'd hopefully face fewer obstacles because people like her had proven that competence had no gender, no expected appearance, no traditional mold. Lieutenant Park, she said. Ma'am, clear my schedule for the dining in. Tell Captain Dalton's unit I accept their invitation. Yes, ma'am. Anything else? Rebecca smiled. Just a reminder to myself. Never underestimate anyone based on appearances. You never know who might outrank you by 3 grades. Park grins. I'll make a note of that, ma'am. As her aide left, Rebecca returned to her desk and opened the briefing materials for her call with the Joint Chiefs. The work continued. It always did. But now, at least, she was doing it with the rank and authority she'd earned through years of proving that the best person for the job wasn't always the one who looked the part. Sometimes they arrived in khaki pants and hiking boots, got mistaken for admin staff, and saved 12 lives before anyone realized who they really were. And that, Rebecca thought as she prepared for her briefing, was exactly how it should be.